The morning started like any other Tuesday. Lisa was making breakfast for her 8-year-old daughter Mia when the doorbell rang. She looked through the window and saw 2 official cars parked outside her small apartment building. Her heart started beating faster. 3 people stood at her door. 2 police officers and a woman in a business suit carrying a folder. The woman showed her badge and introduced herself as Mrs. Johnson from Child Protective Services. "We need to talk about your daughter," Mrs. Johnson said in a cold voice. "We have reports that you're not taking proper care of her medical needs." Lisa felt the world spinning around her. "What do you mean? I take Mia to the doctor all the time. She's been sick and we're trying to figure out what's wrong with her." Mrs. Johnson looked at her papers. "According to our records, your daughter has missed 43 days of school this year. The school nurse says you haven't followed through with medical treatment recommendations." "That's not true." Lisa's voice was shaking. "Mia has been having these episodes where she can't even get out of bed. I've taken her to 5 different doctors. We've done blood tests, scans, everything. Nobody can tell us what's wrong. The police..." Officers stepped forward. One of them spoke gently but firmly. "Ma'am, we need you and your daughter to come with us. There's going to be a hearing, and until then, you'll both need to stay in protective custody." Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Protective custody? We're not criminals. I'm trying to help my daughter get better." Little Mia appeared, in the hallway, still in her pajamas. She had been having another bad morning. Her joints were stiff and painful, and she moved slowly like an old person. Her pale face showed confusion and fear. "Mommy, what's happening?" Mia asked in a weak voice. Lisa knelt down and hugged her daughter. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. These people think they're helping us. But there's been a misunderstanding." Mrs. Johnson watched this interaction with suspicious eyes. "The child appears lethargic and undernourished. This supports our concerns about neglect." "She's not undernourished." Lisa stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. "She's sick. That's why she looks tired. That's why I've been fighting to find answers. For months." The social worker wasn't listening. She had already made up her mind based on the file in her hands. "We need to leave now. You can bring some clothes for both of you." As they packed a small bag, Lisa's mind raced back to the beginning of this nightmare. It had started 6 months ago when Mia began complaining about feeling tired all the time. At first, Lisa thought it was just normal childhood tiredness. But then Mia started having mornings where she couldn't get out of bed. The first doctor said it was probably a virus and would pass. The second doctor suggested it might be stress from her parents' recent divorce. The third doctor ran some basic blood tests but found nothing obvious. Each time, Mia seemed to get a little worse instead of better. The school started calling when Mia missed day after day. Lisa tried to explain that her daughter was genuinely sick, but she could hear the doubt in the school nurse's voice. "Have you considered that she might be anxious about school?" the nurse had suggested. "Sometimes children create physical symptoms when they're worried about something." But Lisa knew her daughter. Mia loved school. She was a bright, happy child who enjoyed learning and playing with friends. This wasn't about anxiety. Something was physically wrong, and Lisa was determined to find out what it was. The ride to the courthouse was silent except for Mia's quiet sniffles. Lisa held her daughter's small hand and tried to stay strong. She had been through difficult times before. The divorce from Mia's father had been painful, and money was always tight working 2 part-time jobs. But this was different. This felt like her whole world was crumbling. At the courthouse, they were processed like criminals. They had to give their personal belongings to a clerk, and Mia had to go through a medical check with a nurse who seemed to be looking for signs of abuse or neglect. "Has anyone ever hurt you at home?" the nurse asked Mia in a gentle voice. Mia shook her head. "No, my mommy takes good care of me. She makes me soup when I'm sick and reads me stories." The nurse wrote something in her file. Lisa wondered what she was writing and whether it would help or hurt their case. They were placed in a holding area with other families in similar situations. Lisa was shocked to see so many people there, mothers with babies, fathers with young children, even some teenagers who seemed to be there without parents. One woman sitting nearby introduced herself quietly. "I'm Rachel. This is my son Tommy. We've been here 2 days already." "What happened to you?" Lisa asked, keeping her voice low so the children couldn't hear. "My neighbor called CPS because Tommy was playing outside alone while I was doing laundry. In the basement. They say I was neglecting to supervise him properly. He's 10 years old and our yard is fenced, but apparently that doesn't matter." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. If they could take children away for something as simple as that, what chance did she have with Mia's complicated medical situation? Another mother joined their quiet conversation. "I'm here because my daughter has behavioral issues at school. They think I'm not disciplining her properly, but she has ADHD and we're still working with doctors to find the right treatment. Some days she has meltdowns, and the school decided that meant I wasn't parenting her correctly." As Lisa listened to these stories, she realized that many families here weren't dealing with actual abuse or neglect. They were dealing with misunderstandings, difficult circumstances, or situations where well-meaning people had jumped to conclusions without knowing the full story. The hours passed slowly. Mia fell asleep with her head on Lisa's lap, exhausted from the stress and her ongoing health issues. Lisa stroked her daughter's hair and tried to stay calm. She needed to be strong for Mia, but inside she was terrified. Around lunchtime, they were given sandwiches and juice boxes. Mia barely ate anything, which Lisa knew would be noted in someone's file as another sign of problems. But Lisa understood that her daughter wasn't eating because she felt sick and scared, not because she was being neglected at home. "Mommy, when can we go home?" Mia asked quietly. "I don't know yet, baby, but we're going to get through this together, okay?" Lisa thought about her ex-husband, David. Their divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, and he had been asking for more time with Mia. Lisa had been hesitant because David didn't seem to understand how serious Mia's health issues were. He thought Lisa was being overprotective and making too big a deal out of normal childhood complaints. Had David called CPS? The timing seemed suspicious. Just last week, his lawyer had contacted Lisa about modifying their custody agreement. David wanted Mia to spend more time at his house, and he had complained that Lisa was keeping Mia from him by claiming she was too sick for visits. The thought made Lisa's stomach turn. Could her own ex-husband have orchestrated this nightmare to gain advantage in their custody battle? It seemed impossible, but the more she thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit together. Mrs. Johnson appeared with more paperwork. "You'll have a hearing tomorrow morning. Until then, you and your daughter will be staying in the family shelter facility." "Can I call a lawyer?" Lisa asked. "You have the right to representation, but court-appointed attorneys are backed up. You might not get someone assigned until the day of your hearing." Lisa felt panic rising in her chest. How could she defend herself and Mia without proper legal help? She didn't know anything about family court or CPS procedures. She was just a single mother trying to take care of her sick child. The shelter facility was a large building with small rooms for families in crisis situations. Lisa and Mia were given a room with 2 narrow beds and a small table. The walls were thin, and they could hear crying and arguing from other rooms. That evening, as Mia slept fitfully in the unfamiliar bed, Lisa sat by the window looking out at the parking lot. She thought about all the medical appointments, all the money she had spent seeking answers, all the sleepless nights she had spent worrying about her daughter's health. How had trying to be a good mother led to this? How had her desperate search for medical answers been twisted into accusations of neglect? She thought about the stack of medical records at home, appointment summaries, test results, referral letters from one specialist to another. She had documentation of every doctor's visit, every attempt to find help for Mia. But none of that seemed to matter to Mrs. Johnson or the system that had swept them up. Lisa made a promise to herself and to her sleeping daughter. She would fight this with everything she had. She would prove that she was a loving, caring mother who had done everything possible to help her child. And somehow, she would find out what was really wrong with Mia's health. But as she looked at the locked door of their temporary room, Lisa realized that fighting the system would be much harder than fighting for medical answers. The system had already decided she was guilty, and proving her innocence would require more than just being a good mother. She needed help, and she needed it fast. Tomorrow's hearing would determine whether she and Mia would go home together or be separated while the investigation continued. The thought of being apart from her daughter made Lisa feel sick to her stomach. The courthouse was buzzing with activity when attorney Michael Rodriguez arrived early that Wednesday morning. He had received an urgent call the night before from a community advocate who had heard about Lisa and Mia's case through word of mouth. In their neighborhood, Michael had been practicing family law for 12 years, and he had seen too many cases where good parents got swept up in an overwhelmed system. Something about this particular case bothered him from the moment he read the initial report. The details didn't add up. As he walked through the courthouse lobby, Michael noticed the unusually large crowd gathering. Word had spread through Lisa's neighborhood about what had happened, and dozens of community members had come to show support. Teachers from Mia's school, neighbors, and even some parents from Mia's class were there with handmade signs. "Free Lisa and Mia," read one sign held by Mrs. Chen, who lived in the apartment next to theirs. "She's a good mother," said another, carried by Mia's second-grade teacher, Miss Rodriguez. Michael approached the crowd and introduced himself. "I'm here to help Lisa and Mia. Can anyone tell me more about their situation?" Mrs. Chen spoke up first. "Lisa is one of the most caring mothers I've ever seen. She works 2 jobs to support that little girl, and she's been running around to doctors for months trying to figure out why Mia keeps getting sick." Miss Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "Mia is a sweet, intelligent child. When she's feeling well, she's one of my best students. But lately she's been having these episodes where she can barely stay awake in class. Lisa always comes to pick her up immediately when we call." "Have you noticed anything that might suggest neglect or abuse?" Michael asked carefully. The teacher shook her head firmly. "Never. Lisa is always asking what she can do to help Mia catch up on missed schoolwork. She brings Mia's homework to the hospital when they have medical appointments. She's devoted to that child." Michael gathered more information from the neighbors and community members before making his way to the family holding area. He needed to meet his clients and understand their story before the hearing began. When he found Lisa and Mia in the waiting area, Michael was struck by how young and frightened they both looked. Lisa appeared exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and worry lines on her face. 8-year-old Mia was curled up next to her mother, moving slowly and carefully like someone in pain. "Mrs. Williams, I'm Michael Rodriguez, your attorney. I'm here to help you and Mia." Lisa looked up with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Are you court-appointed? Because I can't afford to pay for a private lawyer right now." "A community group contacted me about your case," Michael explained. "They're covering my fees because they believe you've been wrongly accused. I want to help you get home with your daughter." For the first time since this nightmare began, Lisa felt a small spark of hope. "You actually want to listen to our side of the story?" "That's exactly what I want to do," Michael said, sitting down beside them. "Tell me everything that's happened with Mia's health, starting from the beginning." Lisa took a deep breath and began explaining the past 6 months. She described how Mia had gradually become more tired and complaining of joint pain. She talked about the sleepless nights when Mia would cry from discomfort, and the helpless feeling of not knowing how to make her daughter feel better. "I've taken her to Dr. Peterson, our family doctor, at least 8 times, Lisa continued. "He ran basic blood tests but said everything looked normal, so he referred us to Dr. Kim, a pediatric specialist." Michael took notes as Lisa continued her story. "Dr. Kim thought it might be a growth-related issue and suggested we wait and see if it would resolve on its own. But Mia kept getting worse, so we went to see Dr. Martinez at the Children's Hospital." "What did Dr. Martinez say?" Michael asked. "She was the first doctor who seemed to really take us seriously," Lisa replied. "She ordered more detailed blood work and some scans. She said Mia's symptoms could be related to several different conditions, and we needed to rule them out one by one." Mia looked up at the lawyer. "The blood tests hurt," she said quietly. "But Mommy always holds my hand and brings me my stuffed elephant." Michael smiled at the little girl. "That sounds like a very good mommy to me." "She is," Mia nodded. She makes me special smoothies when I can't eat regular food, and she reads me stories when I'm too tired to get up. Lisa continued explaining their medical journey. Dr. Martinez referred us to Dr. Thompson, who specializes in autoimmune conditions. In children, he wanted to do more tests to check for things like juvenile arthritis or lupus. And what were those results? Michael asked. We're still waiting for some of them, Lisa said, frustration creeping into her voice. The insurance company has been difficult about approving some of the specialized tests. I've been fighting with them for weeks. Michael was starting to see the bigger picture. Here was a mother who had been doing everything possible to get medical care for her child, but the system was slow and complicated. To an outsider who didn't understand the situation, it might look like Lisa wasn't following through with medical care. What about school? Michael asked. The report mentions a lot of missed days. Lisa sighed. Mia loves school. She's a good student when she's feeling well. But some mornings she literally can't get out of bed. Her joints are so stiff and painful that she moves like she's 90 years old instead of 8. Miss Rodriguez, who had been waiting nearby, approached them. Excuse me, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm Mia's teacher. I wanted to tell you that Lisa always calls the school when Mia is too sick to attend. She brings doctor's notes and tries to get Mia's assignments so she can keep up with her classwork. Thank you, Michael said. That's very helpful information. As Michael continued gathering information, he started to notice some troubling patterns. The timing of the CPS report was suspicious. It had been filed just 2 weeks after Lisa's ex-husband's lawyer had contacted her about modifying their custody arrangement. Tell me about Mia's father, Michael said carefully. How is your relationship with him? Lisa hesitated, glancing at Mia, who was listening. David and I divorced 3 months ago. He doesn't really believe that Mia is as sick as she appears to be. He thinks I'm being overprotective. Has he been supportive of the medical care you've been seeking? Not really, Lisa admitted. He's complained about the cost of all the doctor visits and tests. He said that I'm making Mia think she's sicker than she really is by taking her to so many appointments. Michael made a note about this. In his experience, it wasn't uncommon for custody disputes to escalate into CPS accusations. One parent would sometimes use the child protection system as a weapon against the other parent. Has David asked for more custody time recently? Michael asked. Lisa nodded. His lawyer contacted me last month wanting to modify our agreement. David wants Mia to spend more time at his house, but I've been hesitant because he doesn't understand how to take care of her when she's having a bad day. What do you mean? David thinks that if Mia says she's tired or in pain, she should just push through it and act normal. He doesn't understand that some days she genuinely can't function normally. I'm worried that if she stays with him during one of her episodes, he might think she's just being dramatic and not give her the care she needs. Michael was starting to see a clearer picture of what might have happened. David might have contacted CPS as a way to make Lisa look like an unfit parent, thinking it would help his custody case. I need to ask you something difficult, Michael said gently. Do you think David might have made the report to CPS? Lisa had been wondering the same thing, but hearing it out loud made her stomach turn. I hope not. I can't believe he would put Mia through this just to get back at me. Mrs. Johnson, the social worker, approached their group. The hearing will begin in 20 minutes. I need to review some additional information with the family. Michael stood up. I'll be representing Mrs. Williams and her daughter. Any discussions will need to include me. Mrs. Johnson looked annoyed. This is just a preliminary hearing. We're asking for temporary custody while we complete our investigation. Based on what evidence? Michael asked firmly. I've reviewed your report, and I see a lot of assumptions but very little actual evidence of neglect. The child has missed excessive school days and there's been inadequate follow-through with medical care, Mrs. Johnson replied. That's not accurate, Michael said. Mrs. Williams has been actively seeking medical care for her daughter. The child has a legitimate medical condition that's being investigated by multiple specialists. Mrs. Johnson looked skeptical. We'll see what the judge thinks about that. As they walked toward the courtroom, Michael felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had less than 20 minutes to prepare for a hearing that would determine whether this mother and daughter would be separated or allowed to go home together. The courtroom was packed with community supporters. Michael had rarely seen such a turnout for a family court hearing. It was clear that Lisa and Mia had touched the hearts of many people in their neighborhood. Judge Patricia Williams entered the courtroom, and everyone stood. Michael had appeared before Judge Williams many times over the years, and he knew she was fair but tough. She didn't tolerate nonsense from. After the preliminary hearing, Judge Williams granted Michael 3 days to gather evidence before the main hearing. She allowed Lisa and Mia to return home under supervision, but with strict conditions. A social worker would visit daily, and Lisa had to document every aspect of Mia's care. Michael knew he had to work fast. Something about this case still bothered him, and he was determined to uncover the truth. He started by visiting Lisa and Mia at their apartment to see their living situation firsthand. The apartment was small but clean and well organized. Mia's room was filled with books, art supplies, and educational toys. A medicine chart on the refrigerator showed careful tracking of Mia's symptoms and medications. A calendar was marked with medical appointments in different colored pens. This doesn't look like the home of a neglectful parent, Michael thought to himself. Lisa showed him the thick folder she kept with all of Mia's medical records. "I document everything," she explained. "Every doctor visit, every test result, every time she has a bad day or a good day." Michael was impressed by Lisa's organization and attention to detail. This was clearly a mother who was deeply involved in her child's care, not someone who was neglecting her daughter's medical needs. "Lisa, I need to ask you more about David and your custody situation," Michael said. "The timing of this CPS report is very suspicious." Lisa nodded. "I've been thinking about that too. David has a new girlfriend, and she's been pushing him to get more custody time. She thinks I'm keeping Mia from him on purpose." "What's the girlfriend's name?" Michael asked. "Christine Parker. She works somewhere in the city government, I think. David mentioned she has connections that could help with legal issues." Michael made a note to investigate Christine's background. If she worked in government and had connections to CPS, that could explain how this case had moved so quickly through the system. The next morning, Michael visited Mia's school to talk with her teacher and the school nurse. Miss Rodriguez was happy to speak with him and provided a detailed account of Mia's attendance and behavior. "Mia is never absent without a legitimate reason," Miss Rodriguez explained. "When she's here and feeling well, she's engaged and participates actively. But I can tell when she's having a difficult day, she moves slowly, has trouble concentrating, and sometimes puts her head down on her desk." The school nurse, Mrs. Thompson, was less supportive. "We've had concerns about Mia's frequent absences," she said stiffly. "The mother always has excuses, but we need children to attend school regularly." "Have you observed any signs that suggest medical neglect?" Michael asked directly. Mrs. Thompson hesitated. "Well, no obvious signs, but the child does appear tired and pale most of the time." "Have you considered that those symptoms might be related to an underlying medical condition rather than neglect?" "I suppose it's possible," Mrs. Thompson admitted reluctantly. "But we have to report concerns when we see patterns that worry us." Michael left the school feeling like he was getting a clearer picture. The teacher who saw Mia daily was supportive, but the nurse who only saw her occasionally when she was already feeling unwell had formed negative impressions. That afternoon, Michael met with Dr. Martinez, the pediatric specialist who had been treating Mia. Dr. Martinez was happy to discuss the case and provided valuable insights. "Lisa is one of the most dedicated mothers I work with," Dr. Martinez said firmly. "She keeps detailed records, asks informed questions, and follows all of our recommendations. I wish all parents were as involved in their children's care." "What's your medical opinion about Mia's condition?" Michael asked. "Mia's symptoms are complex and don't fit into an obvious diagnostic category," Dr. Martinez explained. "She has joint pain, chronic fatigue, and what appears to be some kind of inflammatory process. We've ruled out some conditions, but we're still investigating others." "Could these symptoms be caused by environmental factors?" Dr. Martinez paused thoughtfully. "That's an interesting question. Environmental toxins can certainly cause the kinds of symptoms Mia is experiencing. Has anyone investigated her school environment or home environment for potential exposures? Michael made another note. Environmental factors hadn't been mentioned in any of the reports he'd seen. Dr. Martinez, in your professional opinion, has Lisa provided appropriate medical care for her daughter? Absolutely, the doctor replied without hesitation. Lisa has been proactive, thorough, and persistent. She's exactly the kind of advocate every sick child needs. That evening, Michael decided to investigate Christine Parker's background. A quick search revealed that Christine worked for the county health department and had previously worked for Child Protective Services. She had connections throughout the social services system. Michael also discovered that Christine had a sister, named Jennifer, who currently worked as a supervisor in the local CPS office. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. The next day, Michael requested phone records for David's number around the time the CPS report was filed. He also submitted a formal request for information about who had made the initial report to CPS. While waiting for those records, Michael decided to investigate the environmental angle that Dr. Martinez had mentioned. He visited Mia's school and asked to speak with the maintenance supervisor. "We've been having some issues with the older wing of the building," the maintenance supervisor admitted when pressed. "There was a water leak in the basement that caused some mold problems, but we've been working on remediation." "Which classrooms were affected?" Michael asked. The supervisor pulled out a building diagram. "Mostly the second-grade classrooms and the library area. We've been trying to address it, but it's expensive and the school board keeps delaying approval for the full remediation project." Michael felt his pulse quicken. "When did you first discover the mold problem?" "About 7 months ago," the supervisor replied. "Right after the winter flooding we had." The timeline matched perfectly with when Mia's symptoms had started. Michael immediately contacted Dr. Martinez and asked her about the possibility of mold exposure causing Mia's symptoms. "Absolutely," Dr. Martinez said. "Toxic mold exposure can cause all of Mia's symptoms: joint pain, fatigue, cognitive issues, and general malaise. Children are especially susceptible because their immune systems are still developing." "Would you be willing to test Mia for mold toxicity?" Michael asked. "I can order those tests today," Dr. Martinez replied. "If Mia has been exposed to toxic mold at school, that would explain everything." Michael's next step was to find out if other children at the school had been experiencing similar symptoms. He contacted several parents from Mia's class and asked if their children had been having any health issues. The response was overwhelming. Parent after parent reported that their children had been complaining of fatigue, headaches, and various other symptoms throughout the school year. Many had taken their children to doctors, but no one had connected the symptoms to a potential environmental cause at school. "My son has been having terrible headaches," one parent told Michael. "His doctor said it might be stress from school, but the headaches only happen on school days." "My daughter has been exhausted and falling asleep in class," reported another parent. "We thought she wasn't getting enough sleep at home." Michael realized he had stumbled onto something much bigger than just Mia's case. There appeared to be an environmental health crisis at the school that was affecting multiple children, but no one had recognized the pattern. He contacted the county health department to report his findings and request an environmental inspection of the school. He also reached out to a specialist in environmental medicine to evaluate Mia's case. Meanwhile, the phone records he had requested came back with interesting information. David had made multiple calls to a number registered to Jennifer Parker, Christine's sister who worked at CPS, in the weeks leading up to the report being filed. Michael now had evidence suggesting that David had used his girlfriend's family connections to file a fraudulent CPS report as part of his custody strategy. Combined with the emerging evidence of environmental health issues at the school, Lisa's case was looking much stronger. Dr. Sarah Kim, the environmental medicine specialist, agreed to evaluate Mia on an emergency basis. After examining Mia and reviewing her medical history, Dr. Kim was convinced that toxic mold exposure was the most likely cause of her symptoms. "This child shows classic signs of mycotoxin poisoning," Dr. Kim explained to Michael and Lisa. "The joint pain, cognitive fog, chronic fatigue, and immune system dysfunction are all consistent with prolonged exposure to certain types of mold." How long would it take for symptoms to appear after exposure begins? Michael asked. It varies, by individual, but typically symptoms develop over several months of exposure, Dr. Kim replied. The timeline you've described fits perfectly with mold toxicity. Lisa was both relieved and angry. You mean all this time, while I was being accused of neglecting Mia, she was actually being poisoned at school? It appears that way, Dr. Kim confirmed. The good news is that with proper treatment and removal from the source of exposure, most children recover fully from mold toxicity. Michael contacted the school board immediately to demand emergency action to address the mold problem. He also prepared to file legal action. The courthouse was packed beyond its normal capacity when the hearing began Thursday morning. News of the case had spread throughout the community, and local television stations had picked up the story. Parents from Mia's school filled the gallery, many of them holding signs supporting Lisa and demanding answers about their own children's health. Judge Williams entered the courtroom and looked around at the unusually large crowd. This hearing will determine the custody arrangement for 8-year-old Mia Williams. I want to remind everyone that this is a legal proceeding, not a public forum. Any disruptions will result in removal from the courtroom. District Attorney Rebecca Walsh stood to present the state's case. She was known throughout the legal community as a tough prosecutor who rarely backed down from child welfare cases. She had built her career on protecting children, and she wasn't easily convinced to drop cases. Your Honor, D.A. Walsh began, this case involves a pattern of medical neglect that has put a vulnerable child at risk. The evidence shows that Mia Williams has missed 43 days of school this year due to alleged illness, but her mother has failed to follow through with proper medical treatment. Lisa felt her stomach drop as she listened to the accusations. Even though Michael had prepared her for this, hearing the formal charges felt overwhelming. The school nurse reports that the child frequently appears lethargic and undernourished. D.A. Walsh continued. Despite multiple referrals for medical care, the mother has not taken appropriate action to address the child's ongoing health issues. DeWalsh called Mrs. Johnson, the social worker, to testify first. Mrs. Johnson took the stand and repeated the allegations from her report, painting Lisa as an unfit mother who had put her daughter's health at risk through negligence. In my professional opinion, Mrs. Johnson testified, this child has been suffering from medical neglect. The mother's failure to secure appropriate health care has resulted in a deteriorating condition for the child. Michael stood for cross-examination. He had spent hours preparing for this moment, and he was ready to challenge every aspect of Mrs. Johnson's testimony. Mrs. Johnson, did you review any of the actual medical records before making your determination of medical neglect? Mrs. Johnson shifted uncomfortably. I reviewed the summary provided by the school. But did you look at the actual medical records showing the multiple doctor visits, specialist referrals, and ongoing diagnostic testing? Well, no, but so you made a determination of medical neglect without actually examining the evidence of medical care that had been provided? DeWalsh objected, but Judge Williams allowed the questioning to continue. Michael pressed on. Mrs. Johnson, are you aware that Mia has been under the care of 3 different specialists who are actively investigating her condition? I was told that the mother had been shopping around for doctors who would support her claims about the child's illness. Shopping around, or seeking specialist care for a complex medical condition that primary care physicians couldn't diagnose? Mrs. Johnson didn't have a good answer for that question. Next, D.A. Walsh called the school nurse, Mrs. Thompson, to testify about Mia's frequent absences and apparent health issues. The child often appeared tired and complained of various aches and pains, Mrs. Thompson testified. In my experience, children who are properly cared for at home don't have these kinds of chronic complaints. When Michael cross-examined Mrs. Thompson, he asked pointed questions about her medical training and experience with environmental health issues. Mrs. Thompson, what training do you have in diagnosing the difference between medical conditions and parental neglect? I'm a registered nurse with 15 years of school nursing experience. Do you have any training in environmental medicine or toxicology? No, but I don't see how that's relevant. We'll get to that, Michael said. Did you ever consider that Mia's symptoms might be related to conditions in the school environment itself? Mrs. Thompson looked confused. What do you mean? Were you aware that there has been a significant mold problem in the school building, particularly in the area where Mia's classroom is located? D.A. Walsh objected, claiming the question was outside the scope of the original charges, but Judge Williams was clearly interested in the answer. I knew there had been some maintenance issues, Mrs. Thompson admitted, but I wasn't told that it was serious enough to affect the children's health. Michael introduced his first piece of evidence: the environmental inspection report that had been completed just 2 days earlier. The report documented extensive mold contamination throughout the school building, with particularly high levels in the second-grade wing where Mia spent most of her time. Your Honor, this inspection report shows that Mia and her classmates have been exposed to dangerous levels of toxic mold for the past 7 months. This exposure explains all of Mia's symptoms that were attributed to parental neglect. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as parents in the gallery realized that their children might have been exposed to the same toxic conditions. Judge Williams studied the report carefully. Mr. Rodriguez, are you suggesting that this child's health issues are related to environmental conditions at the school rather than parental neglect? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Your Honor, and I have medical evidence to support this theory. Michael called Dr. Kim, the environmental medicine specialist, to testify. Dr. Kim explained how toxic mold exposure could cause all of Mia's symptoms and how the timeline of her illness matched perfectly with the mold contamination at the school. My professional opinion, Dr. Kim testified, Mia Williams is suffering from mycotoxin poisoning caused by prolonged exposure to toxic mold. Her symptoms are classic for this type of environmental illness. Doctor, in cases like this, what would you expect to see from a caring parent? Michael asked. Exactly what we see in this case, Dr. Kim replied. A parent who is concerned about unexplained symptoms would seek multiple medical opinions, pursue specialist care, and document everything carefully. Mrs. Williams has done everything right. D.A. Walsh tried to challenge Dr. Kim's testimony, but the doctor's credentials and expertise were unquestionable. The evidence was becoming overwhelming that Mia's illness was environmental, not the result of parental neglect. Michael then called Dr. Martinez, Mia's pediatric specialist, to testify about Lisa's dedication to her daughter's care. Mrs. Williams is one of the most involved and caring mothers I work with, Dr. Martinez testified. She keeps detailed records, asks informed questions, and follows through on all recommendations. I have never seen any evidence of neglect in her care of Mia. Doctor, based on your interactions with Mrs. Williams, what is your opinion about the allegations of medical neglect? These allegations are completely unfounded, Dr. Martinez said firmly. Mrs. Williams has provided excellent care for her daughter under very difficult circumstances. The testimony from the medical experts was powerful, but Michael knew he still needed to address the underlying question of how this case had come to CPS attention in the first place. He called his next witness, Jennifer Parker, the CPS supervisor who was Christine's sister. Jennifer had been subpoenaed and looked very uncomfortable on the witness stand. Ms. Parker, are you related to Christine Parker, who is in a relationship with David Williams, Mia's father? Christine is my sister, Jennifer admitted reluctantly. Did your sister contact you about Mia Williams' case before it was officially reported to CPS? Jennifer hesitated. We may have discussed it in passing. Michael introduced the phone records showing multiple calls between David and Jennifer in the weeks before the CPS report was filed. Ms. Parker, these records show that you received several calls from David Williams before the report was made. Did Mr. Williams ask you to investigate his ex-wife? I don't recall the specific details of those conversations, Jennifer claimed, but her discomfort was obvious to everyone in the courtroom. Judge Williams was clearly not pleased with what she was seeing. Ms. Parker, are you telling this court that you don't remember conversations that occurred just 2 weeks ago? Your Honor, I handle many cases and I can't remember every phone call I receive. Michael then called David to testify. Mia's father looked nervous as he took the stand, and his testimony revealed the true motivation behind the CPS report. Mr. and Williams, did you contact Jennifer Parker about concerns regarding your daughter's care? I was worried about Mia, David claimed. Lisa seemed to be taking her to doctors constantly, and I thought maybe she was making Mia think she was sicker than she really was. So you thought your ex-wife was providing too much medical care rather than too little? David realized he had contradicted the neglect allegations. Well, I mean, she wasn't getting the right kind of care. Mr. Williams, were you hoping that a CPS investigation would help your custody case? D.A. Walsh objected, but David had already started to answer. I just wanted what was best for Mia. And you thought what was best for Mia was to have her and her mother arrested and detained. David didn't have a good answer for that question. The final witness was Mia herself. Judge Williams had initially been reluctant to have such a young child testify, but Michael convinced her that Mia's own words were crucial to understanding the case. The gavel's final bang echoed through the packed courtroom as Judge Williams made her decision clear. All charges against Lisa were dropped immediately. The crowd that had gathered to support this mother and daughter erupted in cheers and applause that seemed to shake the very walls of the courthouse. Lisa collapsed into her chair, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe freely. The nightmare that had consumed her life was finally over. Mia rushed into her mother's arms, and they held each other tightly as tears of joy streamed down both their faces. But Judge Williams wasn't finished yet. She had more to say, and the courtroom grew quiet as she continued speaking. This case represents a serious failure of multiple systems that are supposed to protect children and families, the judge said, her voice firm and authoritative. We have seen evidence of environmental health hazards being ignored, personal vendettas being pursued through official channels, and assumptions being made without proper investigation. She looked directly at Mrs. Johnson, the social worker who had initiated the case. Ms. Johnson, your handling of this matter was inadequate and unprofessional. You made serious accusations without reviewing the actual medical evidence that was readily available. This family has suffered tremendous trauma because of your failure to do your job properly. Mrs. Johnson shifted uncomfortably in her seat, knowing that her career was likely over. The judge wasn't done with her yet. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, I am ordering a complete review of all cases that you have handled in the past year. If other families have been wrongly accused due to your poor investigative practices, they deserve justice as well. Next, the judge turned her attention to Jennifer Parker, the CPS supervisor who had been involved in the conspiracy with David. Ms. Parker, your actions in this case represent a serious abuse of your position and a violation of the public trust. Using your official role to assist in a personal vendetta against a mother fighting for her child's health is despicable. I'm recommending that you be immediately suspended pending a full criminal investigation. Jennifer Parker looked pale and shaken as she realized the full consequences of her actions were about to unfold. Judge Williams then addressed the broader issues that the case had revealed. I am also ordering an immediate emergency inspection of all schools in this district to identify and address any environmental health hazards that may be putting our children at risk. She looked out at the crowd of parents who had packed the courtroom. Every parent here deserves to know that their children are safe when they send them to school. The evidence in this case suggests that dozens of children may have been exposed to toxic conditions while school administrators and health officials ignored the problem. The judge paused and looked directly at Lisa and Mia. Mrs. Williams, I want to personally apologize to you and your daughter for the trauma you have endured. You have been failed by multiple systems that should have protected you. Your dedication to your daughter's health and well-being in the face of these overwhelming challenges is commendable. Lisa stood up, still holding Mia's hand. Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to take my daughter home and help her get better. You are free to do exactly that, Judge Williams replied with a smile. And I hope that your experience will lead to changes that prevent other families from going through what you have endured. As the court session ended, Michael gathered his papers and prepared to leave. He felt proud of the outcome, but he also knew that the real work was just beginning. There would be investigations to follow, reforms to implement, and other families who might need similar help. Lisa approached him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, I don't know how to thank you. You saved our family. You saved your own family, Michael replied. I just helped tell your story. Your love for Mia and your determination to get her the care she needed is what made this possible. Outside the courthouse, the crowd of supporters had grown even larger. Local news cameras surrounded Lisa and Mia as reporters asked for statements about their experience. I just want people to know that sometimes good parents get caught up in a system that doesn't understand their situation, Lisa said into the microphones. If this can happen to us, it can happen to anyone. We need to make sure that families are protected from false accusations and that children are protected from environmental hazards. Mia stood beside her mother, looking much healthier than she had just a week earlier. Being away from the moldy school environment had already started to improve her condition significantly. "How are you feeling now, Mia?" one reporter asked gently. "I'm feeling better," Mia said in her clear young voice. "And I'm happy that me and my mommy can go home together." Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who had been one of Lisa's strongest supporters, organized a welcome home celebration at their apartment complex. Dozens of neighbors, teachers, and community members came together to show their support for the family that had been through so much. As the weeks passed, the consequences of the case continued to unfold. The environmental inspection of the school district revealed mold problems in 6 different buildings, affecting hundreds of children. The school board was forced to close several schools temporarily while emergency remediation was completed. Parents whose children had been experiencing unexplained health symptoms finally had answers. Many of them sought medical treatment for mold toxicity, and most of the children showed significant improvement once they were removed from the contaminated environments. A class action lawsuit was filed against the school district for knowingly exposing children to toxic conditions. The lawsuit resulted in millions of dollars in damages for affected families and forced the implementation of strict environmental health protocols in all district schools. Jennifer Parker was criminally charged with abuse of power and conspiracy. She ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service. She was permanently barred from working in Child Protective Services. Mrs. Johnson was fired from her position and had her social work license suspended. The review of her previous cases revealed that she had made similar errors in judgment in at least 12 other cases, leading to wrongful separations of families who were later reunited. David faced his own consequences for his role in the conspiracy. The family court judge in his custody case was made aware of his fraudulent CPS report, and he lost significant custody rights as a result. He was also required to pay all of Lisa's legal fees and damages related to the false accusations. Most importantly, Mia's health continued to improve dramatically once she was no longer exposed to the toxic mold at school. Dr. Kim, the environmental medicine specialist, worked with Lisa to develop a treatment plan that helped Mia detoxify from the mold exposure and rebuild her immune system. Within 3 months, Mia was back to being the active, energetic child she had been before the health problems began. She was able to return to school full-time at a different building that had been certified as environmentally safe. Lisa also began to heal from the trauma of the experience. She joined a support group for parents who had been wrongly accused by Child Protective Services, and she became an advocate for families facing similar situations. I realized that our experience, as terrible as it was, could help other families. Lisa explained to a local newspaper reporter 6 months after the case ended. If our story prevents even one other family from going through what we went through, then something good came out of all that pain. Lisa and Michael worked together to develop new protocols for CPS investigations that required thorough review of medical records before accusations of medical neglect could be made. They also advocated for better training for social workers on environmental health issues and complex medical conditions. The case became a landmark example of how environmental health hazards can be mistaken for parental neglect, and it led to policy changes in multiple states. Medical schools began teaching future doctors about the importance of considering environmental factors when children present with unexplained symptoms. Mia, now thriving in her new school environment, occasionally speaks to groups of parents and healthcare providers about her experience. Despite her young age, she has become a powerful advocate for children's environmental health rights. I want other kids to know that if they feel sick at school, they should tell their parents, Mia said during one presentation. And I want parents to know that they should keep fighting for their children, even when other people don't believe them. Judge Williams, who had presided over the case, often pointed to it as an example of why the family court system needed reform. She worked with legal advocacy groups to develop better protections against malicious use of child protective services in custody disputes. This case taught me that we must always look beyond the surface of accusations and seek the truth, even when that truth is more complicated than we initially expected, Judge Williams said during a judicial conference presentation about the case. The school where Mia had been exposed to toxic mold was eventually demolished and rebuilt with state-of-the-art environmental controls. A plaque near the entrance honors the families who fought for safer school.